Good evening and welcome back to another conversation as part of the Irish Roots Festival. I'm really excited tonight to have round this table, this virtual space, a group of people that I actually would consider friends, because each of these organisations in one way or another has really supported the work of I Am Irish along the journey. I'm actually going to ask you all tonight, and it's probably a bit weird that I'm asking you to come as leaders of these spaces and then say to you, can you leave all the leadership on the shelf behind you and can you just bring yourself to the table? But it would be really useful that, that we just talk. This is really informal space. I don't want nothing that's pre-prepared or anything that you feel like this is what we should be saying. I want you to just talk honestly and openly. And I hope that in us having this conversation tonight, that we may be able to support some other organizations that might be thinking about how they work and some of the work that they might want to do to ensure that their spaces are really inclusive. So without further ado, I'd just like to say that tonight we've got around the table Dublin, London, Chicago, and Boston. So I think I'm going to just head straight over to the homeland, to Dublin. So Niamh, could you just introduce yourself and the work you do, please?
Absolutely. Just first of all, thanks, Lorraine. This is the first catch-up I've had with you personally or professionally in quite some time, because you're such a powerhouse and such a busy woman. So I am the interim director at Axis Ballymun. Axis is an arts and community resource centre, and those two functions, those two ways of being and doing interest us most when we nudge the two of them together and make the bit in the middle of the Venn diagram bigger. So we aim to resource, support, connect with a variety of artists, a variety of groups and individuals in as many meaningful contexts as possible. And that is how Lorraine first came to work with us as an exhibiting artist, and then that went so well that she became a resident artist. And then I am also chair of the board of Arts and Disability Ireland. And that's me.
Thank you very much, Niamh. Can we come back to London, please? I feel like I'm in the Eurovision, just going over to the stage.
And the points from London, Lorraine. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. I'm Brendan Miller. I'm Arts and Culture Manager at the London Irish Centre, and I've no problem suspending my putting aside my job title and talking frankly with you, Lorraine, because I've known Lorraine since I first started with the London Irish Centre as events officer, and I've been your tech support on many events. But I'm delighted to get the chance to work with you in general, because as Niamh said, you're such a powerhouse, and the projects that we've done with you, I always feel really privileged to get to work on them, with the I Am Irish exhibition that we've done online, and our Black History Month program that you curated as well. It's always really meaningful work that makes my job a lot nicer. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Brendan. Can we now head over to Boston?
Hi, Lorraine and everybody. I'm Ronnie Miller, not related to Brendan, but same spelling. So Ronnie Miller from the Rian Immigration Centre in Boston, and originally from County Antrim, and moved over to the States 20 plus years or so ago. We're big fans of Lorraine and all of your work, Lorraine. We're inspired by everything that you do, and it was last year when we did the Black Lives Matter community conversation. It was great to partner with you in that conversation and to really sort of look at that. The Rian is a welcome centre for immigrant and refugee families. Initially, it was the Irish Immigration Centre to help Irish immigrants get access to immigration legal services, and then we expanded that to other social services, resource and support services, education programs, and really from the beginning, the founders, all Irish immigrants, really wanted to be an organization, be a community that was inclusive and sort of like wanted to sort of work towards a community where all are welcomed and valued. So it's been an interesting journey for us over the last 30 years, and I've been at the centre for the last 10 years. So I'm also on the Coalition of Irish Immigration Centres, which is a national organisation, on the steering committee of the statewide Immigrant Collaborative. So that's who I am.
Thank you so much, Ronnie. And last but not least, Chicago.
I knew you'd leave me till last, Lorraine. My name is Paul Dowling, and I work with an organisation called Irish Community Services based in Chicago. We're a relatively small organisation, and we do immigration and social services largely for the Irish and Irish American community, but we come across all sorts of people from all sorts of places. I'm glad, Lorraine, you're asking us to park our titles and our organisations, because I had planned on opening with a caveat, and that was that neither I nor Irish Community Services are experts in diversity or inclusion. But what we are is an organisation that's keen to, I think, identify and take advantages of opportunities to create more inclusion with the people we work for. So we're glad to be here, and we're hoping to learn a lot.
Well, I'm delighted, and that really leads me on, I guess, to the questions. So I'm not going to ask you a multitude of questions. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions, and I'd like us to really try and dissect them. And I know, I've spoken to you before, so I talk quite a lot. And tonight I'm not going to talk so much. I'd like to hear from you. So I'm going to just talk a little before we get there. So the I Am Irish journey began at the London Irish Centre. And I have to mention Gary Dunne. I know he's not here tonight, but he has been such an incredible ally, And I remember when I first met him, when we're talking even about unconscious bias, I had my own, because I believed that wasn't a space that would be as welcoming of me as it was. And I remember my first conversations with Gary and really kind of calling him out on the fact that there was no one that looked like me on his walls, and saying, like, I want to change that. And I remember him saying, well, yeah, sure, let's do that. And that was such a welcoming moment. And actually, I don't know that in my life to that stage, I had felt that welcomed in an Irish space outside of Ireland. And that's just gone from strength to strength. And Gary and the rest of the team now at the London Irish Centre have, we've built a lovely relationship over those years. So, Brendan, I'm going to come to you to just start this conversation, because I know, and it's great, when you're talking about the tech support, you've done such a good job that, look, we've managed to pull off this festival because, I thought I'd be calling you. And I actually had said to Gary a little while back, do you mind if I borrow Brendan for a little while? And he said, yeah, call him. And I felt so proud that I didn't need to call you this week. But I was thinking, like, Brendan's going to be so proud of me for actually managing to do the backline of this on my own. So you've been a good teacher as well as everything else, Brendan. But when you think about the journey for the London Irish Centre in becoming more inclusive, what do you think? So, because I feel like I am going to ask you what are the kind of benefits from that. But I feel like sometimes the benefits feel like they're kind of clear. But what are some of the benefits and some of the challenges of that? And I'm going to actually ask each of you about that.
Yeah, so I suppose you kind of mentioned there you didn't see the London Irish Centre as being very welcoming, and I suppose that is, one of our key values now is to be a welcoming organisation, and I think that links back to Céad Míle Fáilte, 100,000 welcomes. I think that's a value that's ingrained in Irish culture, in Irish society. We have we want to be as welcoming as possible, but like the benefits, I would say to the London Irish Centre is that we want to be a representation of modern Ireland as it is today, and not just a monument to those who set up the London Irish Centre, those who emigrated in the 1950s. So we want to be a modern representation of Ireland. To be more inclusive also just allows us to break down these stereotypes and misconceptions of the Irish. Some of the negative stereotypes that have arisen for Irish people in Britain, And to do that as well, we've just launched a project called London Irish Stories, where we basically like we're trying to represent the stories of London Irish as it is today, and not just, you know, these preconceptions that people might have. So I think, you know, this also makes it, the benefits as well is that it makes it a nicer place to work. You know, it makes, you know, working in the London Irish Centre, it's definitely, it's a more desirable place to work when we're more diverse and we're more open. Diverse teams bring better creativity and better ideas. You know, we regularly campaign through our services for justice and fairness for members of the community. And I think to not be an inclusive organisation will be a complete contradiction of that. So it all kind of comes back to our own values and what we, you know, what we want to align with. We also get to work with organizations like I Am Irish, like yourself. We get to work with people like yourself. And you know, you've obviously helped us by delivering training to our organization as well on unconscious bias, and curating the Black History Month program. I should probably highlight there as well that it's up to an organization and its individuals to educate ourselves, and we shouldn't expect to be educated. But yeah, I think those are the benefits for me anyway. I'll move on to challenges, I suppose. Challenges of being a more inclusive organization. The challenges, you know, it's as some people might want to ignore it. There is a problem around racism in Ireland, and I think, you know, in my experience growing up, is that racism may be more so geared towards people from the traveling community, but I think it's a wide issue in general. If we're running events online, there's also challenges around maybe online trolls, and it's just not a nice thing to have to deal with as part of your work. There's challenges in breaking down people's perceptions of Ireland, particularly around like what Ireland means to them. You know, possibly for people who've maybe emigrated 50 years ago, they have a completely different view of what Ireland is. So it's a challenge to challenge that view, basically. Other challenges is, you know, it takes time, resources, just and try new things. And as I kind of mentioned before we went live, we need to be okay with taking risk and uncertainty as well, of new things, you know, being comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know, the community have also been very supportive in our moves, like to make more diverse programming as well. So it's a challenge, but it's rewarding as well.
And it's been really great to see. Ronnie, can I come over to you? Tell us what you think.
Well, so yeah, we've been really as an organization, you know, I would say in the last 12 months, we've really been wrestling with this. What does it mean to be a welcoming space for not just our guests, but really for our colleagues, for our colleagues and for our volunteers and for our board members and everything. So we've really been going through a very sort of intensive sort of process of thinking about, you used the word inclusion, but, you know, we're thinking about sort of racism and anti-racism and belonging, right? So is there a sense of sort of like, does everyone feel that they have a place? Do they feel valued and respected in this place that we call the Rian Immigration Centre? And you know, obviously, you know, we want everyone to feel a sense of belonging and a place where their voices matter, their opinions matter, and that you know, that we sort of like we have this sort of safe space to be working, right? We are a human rights organization, and yet we bring all of this sort of, you talked about unconscious bias, but we bring all of this racism and sexism and everything, with us into the workplace. So we've been, I would say, deeply challenged and stopped in our tracks around really being reflective on this, right? Sort of trying to have an honest conversation with ourselves. Is this really an inclusive sort of safe space to work, right? So it's been interesting. It's been really, really interesting. Obviously, we want people to be themselves. We want people to be, sort of like feeling that they are contributing towards our mission. Our center supports families, immigrant families from 120 different countries. So, including Ireland and Haiti and Central America and Africa and all over the world, right? And yet our staff, we're realizing that we ourselves are not a diverse group of people. As I'm sort of like a white middle-aged man, right? I'm sort of even like, so we're really sort of digging in deep to this whole thing, and I think a lot of organizations are, and it's amazing to see those difficult conversations and there's so much. You mentioned earlier about language, we're wrestling with all of these sort of language pieces, but I think we most want, our colleagues to have a sense of belonging. And then obviously our guests, if somebody's coming in to see an immigration attorney or a social worker or attending a class or participating in one of our events, that there is a real sense of belonging, and that regardless of their country of origin or the color of their skin, or that there's a real sense of belonging.
And that's kind of what we all want, don't we? Like we all want that sense of belonging for our own well-being. I'm going to come over to you, Paul. Thank you, Ronnie.
So benefits, and I suppose I have a hard time thinking about inclusion in terms of benefits, or thinking of it as like a debate, right, where we're weighing pros and cons. Because in a way, I feel like my organization, it's more about a mandate, and it's a self-imposed mandate. Like, we have a mission statement that is to serve and empower and connect the Irish and Irish American community of the Midwestern United States. It doesn't talk about any section of that Irish or Irish American community, any particular color or religion. We said we serve and empower and connect all of the Irish and Irish American community. So I don't think we really have a choice in that. But there are benefits, absolutely. And I think when we think of benefits, in one respect, I know, and anybody, I think, is everybody here familiar with the Department of Foreign Affairs and the ESP? And I think a lot of the audience will be too. But I know across the world, there's concern about our Irish communities overseas and the continuation of those communities. And I think if we're to engage, I think that next generation who are more diverse, want to be around a more diverse community, I think it's imperative to our own communities and their survival. And then in terms of community and who I think bigger is always better. Like, more ideas, more people, more fun, actually. But there's more, I think, strengths and resources when you're bigger in size. The challenges, I think for us as an organization, and I think Ronnie touched on it a little bit too, we don't always have in-house people who are from diverse parts of the Irish community and don't bring that insight to the table. So we don't know what we don't know in some respects. And I feel like as an organization, we have gotten better when we have a staff person who identifies as LGBT. We have a staff person for a little bit longer, unfortunately, who identifies as a mixed race Irish person. And those two people have really helped us focus on those issues and realize where we haven't been as inclusive as we could be. I think it's helped us to understand that inclusion is not just an absence of exclusion, if that makes sense. Like, it's very much something you have to do purposefully. So just to say you're not excluding somebody doesn't mean you're actively including them either. And then I think in terms of inclusion, there's also, and it's a sad thing to say considering how important an issue it is, but there are practical challenges around priority making. Because inclusion is a marathon, it's not a sprint. It's something you have to do consistently. It's not, you can't just do a campaign and come on in, here we are, and then it's done. It has to be done every day, every month, every year, consistently. You have to make it a priority, and that's not always easy to do when there are so many things vying for your attention.
Thank you, Paul. I mean, that just made me think actually even about being anti-racist. Like, it's an action word, it is a doing word, and you have to work at it. And I think inclusion is the same. It is an active word. It has to be part of strategy. It really. So anyway, I'm not going to go down that road. Niamh, I'm coming over to you.
Oh, that's tough, because I can echo and identify with much of what's just been said, but I'll try and bring it on a bit, I suppose, in terms of the creative spaces that we have and share and operate, and again, you know, I'd echo, you know, what was said. It's not an either or. It's just something you do and should be doing, rather than being pros or cons. But maybe that wasn't always that obvious to us, and maybe to peer organizations, and it is uncomfortable to just own that and to embrace it rather than admitting to it. Because if you admit to it, you kind of get to shelve it. Whereas if you embrace it, you're stepping into that place of vulnerability, of discomfort. And it's very hard to go back. You know, you used to have an I am Irish pin, Lorraine, and, you know, maybe we should all start by walking around with that, just saying, I am biased. Haven't really interrogated it, but maybe I am. And, you know, I'm just going to start by owning that, so that we get that out of the way and then get to this point of meaningful encounter. And, you know, with an arts centre, you know, that houses a theatre, a dance studio, a recording studio, a gallery, you know, Lorraine, you've featured across most of those spaces by now in one way or another. But we should always be coming at our programming and our welcoming from a place of curiosity. Every single thing we do should have some of that at its essence. And so, you know, I'd be curious to look at our own organisation or any other organisation, just to say, well, whose stories aren't being told? And once you ask that question, you cannot avoid asking, why? Why not? What do I do about this? How do I improve it? And that's from, you know, a very basic fundamental necessity. But beyond the basic human rights issue, it's just not interesting to continue to tell the same stories in the same ways and ignore who and what is all around, in your inbox, you know, on your doorstep, on the bus. And if our stages and screens and street corners aren't spaces to bring that to the fore, for us as people who love story and song and everything that is epic. And I don't mean just plays, but, you know, colleagues I've worked with have, you know, that kid humming a tune as he picks daisies in the front garden, that's creativity. And if we're going to say that everybody's creativity is valid and important, but if the stuff that gets made and resourced and supported all looks the same, then we've let someone down, we've let several people down, we've let ourselves down. So I'm not too sure if that covers benefits.
It was, and I mean, I just found myself thinking, Niamh, while I was listening to you talking, particularly when we're thinking about kind of uncomfort, because I know the uncomfort that I felt for so many years going into places, and so many other people that I think that I Am Irish represents. Particularly when we're thinking about Irish spaces. And so, and I'm not asking you, well, I probably am asking you to think about other organisations, because I'm wondering if part of the challenge is that people don't really want to ask those questions, because you're right. Once it's okay when you don't know or when you don't deal with it, you can carry on almost like you know you're not aware of it. But when you ask the questions, or when you're having those uncomfortable conversations with yourself and with your team, then actually you do need to respond to it, and you do need to move forward. And one of the challenges that I see quite a lot for lots of organizations is around recruitment, and it's about programming. And I feel the challenge the opposite way, because actually we've just had 4 days of activity of people of all kinds of identities, and that wasn't that hard to find. And so I find it feels really challenging that organizations are still struggling with that. And going back to what Brendan was saying, like, I offer myself to organizations to help to support that, because I think that if we're not, I don't think it's enough. I know that lots of people think, oh, well, it shouldn't be our responsibility to educate people. But for me, in order to be able to move things forward, I'm happy to put myself in that role, because ultimately, if that means that me, my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren to come are going to feel more included and feel that real sense of belonging in any Irish space that they go to around the world. Because one of the beautiful things is, even when I go on holidays, I think about, where am I going to go? Where's a place that is going to accept me? Where am I going to find someplace? I remember when I was younger, even my grandmother saying, they'd have an Irish pub there. Now, I don't even drink alcohol, but I know I'll go and I get a bit of grub, and I know what I'm going to get wherever it is that I go. And it is that sense of going to an Irish space anywhere in the world. You kind of know that you're going to get that feeling from home, unless that you go there and you don't really feel represented within those spaces. So, and this is the big question, I suppose, but what do you think that Irish organizations can do more to reach? And it is a massive conversation, and I'm not expecting you to come up with the answer around the table, but it would be useful for us to have this kind of collective thought process. What can organizations be doing more to ensure full representation of the complexities of Irishness? And actually, maybe we should even think about that as a word, like, well, what even is it to be Irish? And there's so many things we complain about, but it's the one thing that I know I love about myself. I love the fact that I'm an Irish woman. And most of the people that I talk to within I Am Irish, they are really connected to their Irishness, even for those that will talk about maybe horrific things that have happened, or struggles, or systems not in place, but actually we all want to connect with our Irishness. So how can we ensure better representation in Irish organizations? Or what do you think? Even for me, and maybe I'm asking for your advice for us then, even as an organization, how can we approach other organizations? Because one of the things that's become really clear to me this year in particular, we've had the pandemic. The pandemic has really brought to the forefront the inequalities that there are for people of color globally. That's been, without a shadow of a doubt. We've seen so much research that says to us that people of color are more at risk of death. Now, I became really aware of the nuances that there are, particularly for those of us that identify with Irish heritage and having another heritage that are of brown skin, because often that, it made me realize more that a lot of Irish organizations are not set up to offer the kind of support that's needed for people that identify as being Irish and of brown skin.
When you look at the report that's coming out on the maternity services at the moment, like, it's endemic.
It's horrendous. And, I've asked many mothers actually that have gone through maternity in all of our countries. Has anyone told you about the Mongolian blue spot that, that lots of babies have? And I have to say 9 out of 10 mothers will tell me no. If I ask, has anyone ever told you about sickle cell? They'll tell me no. And this is kind of globally, actually, that people are having these kind of conversations. And so I'm really aware that the Irish organizations are not set up. When we look at the census form, I won't even get started on the census form tonight, because, I did a residency at Access and my interest was in the census form in Ireland. And no matter how frustrated I was when I looked at it in Ireland, when I started looking at the census form in the UK and then America, I became even more frustrated, particularly in the States, because you can be a whole multitude of things. But the one thing you can't be is Irish and brown. And in England, they've done so much work in the ONS, but still, you know, we're always that mixed other, and it's just not that black and white. So I promised I wasn't going to do all the talking, and I'm doing the talking again. So I'm coming back to you. What can Irish organisations do? And can I invite anybody that is watching, if you want to ask a question that's going to add to this conversation, please do pop it in the chat function, and we will try and answer. Niamh, can I come to you first, please?
Yeah, I mean, at the risk of starting by oversimplifying something, you know, I consider myself to be in a position of great privilege for a multitude of reasons. And, you know, the first thing I'd say would be to don't let overthinking it stop you from getting started. You know, don't try and be perfect, but because perfect doesn't exist, but what will ultimately be the opposite of perfection is if you try and speak to a community or for a community without having engaged that community. And it's, you know, we can get the, you know, if it's about us, not without us, we can bandy that about, but genuinely, you have to trust people to be experts in their own experience, and just keep on welcoming yourself into that space. Never mind welcoming people that you wish to collaborate in. I'm sure that if they're anyone like Lorraine, you know, they're up for it. They're there. They're already there. So you need to start welcoming your thinking in that expansion, and trust and listen, and then put the resources that are at your disposal from whatever position of privilege you sit behind their ideas, their art, their suggestion, their needs, depending on what, you know, we all work in different contexts. And also, you know, with us, we work with artists across, you know, a multitude of contexts. And one of the things, and, you know, I know that this can vary from organization to organization, but the artist gets to make the art that they want to. It may or may not have anything visibly to do with their identity, with their heritage. And again, you must ensure that there's an equality of what has been offered to artists regardless, because again, they will tell you if this is the work that they want to make, and you can support them in making it. But also, you know, when I was thinking about what is, again, coming back to art's work, the work is the work. You also have to think about the lens of the audiences, because we're always we're consuming information and culture, and often through a white lens. Like there are very few critics from what one would call diverse backgrounds. You know, there are very so how can we fully encounter something and share with it if it's always through this pretty bland lens?
Thank you, Niamh. Anyone else like to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to kind of echo what Niamh said, and I think Paul mentioned it earlier. It's just like what other organizations can do is to recognize. I think the first step is to recognize that it's a journey and that there's no finish line. There's no box ticked. That's what we've done. You know, it's a constant journey. I think, you know, just to run 1 or 2 Black History Month events a year it shouldn't be the case. You know, it should be it should just be all year round. I can see actually a Camden Council have expanded it to Black History Season, but I think even at that, like it's not a fixed time frame. You know, it's important to take these sentiments into like everyday work and to operate, you know, as inclusive all the time, for it to become second nature and not tokenistic, basically. I think, it's important for us as well, for all organizations, to look inward, look at yourself, look at, things like our own organization. Why do we not have an accurate representation of the broader Irish community, as we should have? The change should come from within. And I think organizations need to be as diverse as the community that they want to represent as well. So yeah, I think that's my sentiments.
Thank you, Brendan. While you were just talking, I couldn't help but think, just thinking about Black history, like, we're Black all year round. We're not just happened for a little bit of time. It's like, this is life every day. And every day I feel like it's historic. Once the day is done, yesterday was history. And so it is really important that it really is central to everything. Paul, I'm going to come over to you.
Yeah, I suppose what popped into my head, I think, as we were chatting and thinking, was visibility, right? And I think people can be exclusionary, but so can systems. And I think invisibility kind of reinforces that kind of exclusion. So I think often with Irish communities, you have a bunch of diverse people in the Irish community, but they're not the ones who are showing up to the big events. So they don't see the other diverse people in the community. The mainstream, if you like, community don't see that there's diversity in their community. So it becomes this kind of myth, even though it's very real. So I wonder how we can weave that in, more visibility. And I think there's big things and small things that we can do. And I think there are those big things, like those big impactful statements you can make at group gatherings, festivals. You can do campaigns, and funders are always great for like the stick and the carrot, I think they really help us too. But then there's the small practices, I think, and I think, again, they are practices that we can all do as organizations to kind of weave inclusion into our days. I'm thinking of even small little beacons, small signals we can send in terms of, I think, like the images we use on our newsletters, our websites, slap up the pride flag. I think it's about figuring out how to make it a practice, right? And I think it's something we've worked on. And again, like I say, being visible, having staff and leadership that are visible members of these communities really helps us focus. But yeah, I would love to see my organization and organizations here in Chicago make like inclusion a program, but not by, it's something we measure every year. And the same way we measure attendance, the same way we measure the age, whatever,
I think I agree. I think it should be brought up at every staff meeting in the same way health and safety should be. It's like, are we doing what we're saying we're doing? When organizations are getting funded, I'd be hard to find an organization now that offers funding that doesn't suggest that you should be reaching everybody. So actually, if you're not, why not? And, what steps do you need to be putting in place to ensure that you are? Ronnie, I'm going to come over to you. I saw you nodding actually when Paul was talking. You recognize some of that.
Absolutely, yeah. And what everybody has said, it's such an interesting conversation and really stimulating and sort of challenging. Like I guess, so if I think about, how can we encourage other organizations to be involved in this movement? Certainly, in the United States and in Boston, I think there's first a recognition that as white sort of community members, in many ways we're part of the problem, right? That there is a white supremacy sort of in the ether of everything that we're doing, right? And we got to sort of recognize and take responsibility for that. In many ways we're part of our work is to dismantle that this idea of dismantling some of the systemic racism and the challenge that is, how do we invite other organizations into that sort of work, right? And I think it's what we've done in the past. I feel it's worked well. Is like when we have events it's a diverse group that are up there. Like, I think people are called into this. I feel that Irish immigrants, first of all, I want to say, like, to me, to be Irish is to be anti-racist, right? That is part of who we are, and if we, my experience with others is that when Irish people sort of are alongside racialized persons or people of color, like it's all about that relationship building. So I think what I'm trying to say is, like, we need to create spaces where we are together in relation. And when you do that, then you see that this is actually a better way to be, right? It's a sort of a community, a beloved community of neighbors and friends. But the big difficulty is, as I said, there's a resistance to this, right? I feel as if there's sometimes a resistance to it because of fear or of privilege or of letting go of, the whole sort of, so it is very difficult, but it's important, as Paul says, to take those first steps to, intentionally sort of face into it and partner with other organizations, partner with other Irish organizations, partner with non-Irish organizations. It's so important that Irish organizations look for ways to collaborate with non-Irish organizations, because in that, then you actually feel more Irish. You have a sense of your identity, that it's actually something that it's not a place of, it's a gift and not a threat to be in relationship with someone who's different, So anyway, I'm rambling on here, but it's very challenging because there's so much racism, and unfortunately, like, we're part of it, we are part of it, and that's a hard thing to say. It's a hard thing to acknowledge, but we have our work cut out for us.
Thank you for that honesty, Ronnie. One of the things that we at I Am Irish are going to do is that we've made a decision to have a global roundtable once a month for a number of months, starting in June, to invite Irish organisations around the globe that want to learn more and want to learn from each other and together, because I have a real recognition that we have to be in the middle of it and we have to actively be helping each other. And so if we're helping one organisation, they can help another and they can help another. And so I'm inviting you all, and any other Irish organisation that is here, I will be letting people know when that is going to be, because more and more that we, like, what we hear quite a lot is when we talk about Irish communities and whether it's Black American, Black British, Black Irish, or whatever, and we talk so much about these communities like being side by side, but actually we are the same people. We are all part of Irish community, and I think that is often the challenge that there is, and I guess that the work that we have to keep pushing at is that we're not on the side. We're not a community that is working alongside. We have in lots of places in the world through generations, Irish and people of African descent have come together in so many different ways throughout generations. But actually, my Irish ancestors have been in Ireland, have come from Ireland for centuries. My Black family are an Irish family. And I think that the more that Irish organizations are able to visually see that and understand that, then we may be halfway in becoming part of that solution. And I guess that the roundtable that I'm offering is an offer to Irish organisations to be part of that solution. Because yes, it is difficult. It is difficult to change a lifetime of a mindset. we know, you know, I'm not going to get into lots of stories of religion or whatever, but we know there's been lots of white savior stories of, you know, starving people. And when you think, I actually spoke to somebody at the London Irish Centre after I did some training for the centre a little while back. We had a conversation with a small group afterwards. We talked about white privilege and actually Ramadan, because, you know, there were so many people that really just didn't understand that. And it was so... It was a beautiful moment of people wanting to really have an understanding. And I found myself even feeling like I'm far more educated on this than I even thought I was, because I was able to answer all of those questions. And what I saw in the moment was people feeling just almost, it was kind of even like a relief that I've got somewhere I can ask this question and I'm not being judged, I'm not being seen, but actually now I can make a change, I can do something different, because I think that there's so much more that unites us than there is to separate us. And I think that that's what we need to focus on, and we need to work together to be part of those solutions. So just before actually the time goes really quickly, right? When we're having these kind of conversations, so much that we could be talking about. So I'm just going to kind of go around and just ask you all, I don't know even if it's a hope or a wish or maybe it's even what you need. What do you need? What do you want? Or what do you think that will help Irish organisations in this kind of next step? Not the giant steps, because, you know, going back to what Paul was saying earlier, a lot of these things are systematic. They are, you know, sometimes we hear someone say something and it's not very nice. And I'm not talking about real vile racism. I'm talking about moments of ignorance. And what happens is often, even in those moments of racist language or racist slur, we get so tied up in that smaller moment that we're not thinking about the bigger systems that are at play behind all of those things. And I think that we have to start dissecting that some of those systems in order to really start making some kind of change on the ground. And I'm talking a lot again, so I'm handing back over. Paul, you're smiling there, so I'm giving that back to you.
Oh, sorry.
Just last thoughts.
The last time I laughed, on the panel. I think what we need is, and I know there was a comment made earlier about you don't want to place the responsibility with the marginalized group for making change or creating inclusivity. I think the flip side of that is we do also need the stories of the marginalized people. I can't tell the story of anybody else but me and my experience and what groups I belong to. So we need those stories. I think we need more discussions like this and engaging with diverse groups, not just around their diversity, but also around what makes us all the same, like all our Irishness. I think we have to be careful how we frame those conversations and frame them as conversations and telling stories and not as debates. Because I think if we ask somebody to stand up and, you know, justify why they are or have entitlement to their identity, we risk dehumanizing them. So I think we've got to be careful. But overall, I think I'm relatively optimistic because I think there is a new generation in Ireland, the most diverse generation that's ever lived on the island of Ireland in lots of different ways. And they're like, you know, coming into what are they, probably like in their 20s now, late 20s. And I think they're going to change a bunch, and I think it'll filter down through. And not only the diverse members of that generation, the mainstream, the majority of that generation who are used to and love all of these diverse people in their communities and in their countries and in their schools and in their everywhere. And I'm really excited to see how all of that plays out and how it eventually plays out for Irish communities overseas.
And I think that that's part of the challenge, Paul, because actually in Ireland, they're probably 10 years ahead of where we are with Irishness overseas. And I don't think that's part of the challenge, that when we're looking at the diaspora, that their needs are not being met because they're not being seen. And so when we're looking at Irish organisations overseas, what happens when those young Irish people leave out? No, even forget the young ones. What happens with those that are my age? Like yesterday, we had Jude had his 80th birthday. He's born and bred in Ireland. Where's the services for him when he goes? And that's not, I guess I'm not asking you to answer that, but I guess that is the challenge. That is the challenge for organizations, because there's lots of Judes in London. There's lots of Judes in Chicago. They're in Boston. They're in New York. They're all over. They're out there. And it's because that the spaces don't feel like it's their spaces why we're not seeing them. Brendan, I'm going to go over to you. Thanks, Paul.
Yeah, well, just when Paul was speaking there, I mean, not to contradict Paul or anything, but obviously I'm quite hopeful. I see like a new generation in Ireland, but I'm also a little bit fearful because I also see a rise in far right sentiments in Ireland, and I see into a lot of intolerance. Now it might be my doom scrolling throughout lockdown and finding these scary articles and stuff like that, but I just will be hopeful for the future that the rest of Irish society would speak up against that, because I think it's something Ronnie said earlier, that it's as Irish we shouldn't be racist, and we shouldn't be anti-immigrant, because given our own rich history of emigration, it's quite hypocritical for us to be anti-immigrant as a society. So yeah, I mean that's one hope, is just that people will be more outspoken against intolerance. And another hope, I think, for people living abroad is that they'll think of Ireland fondly, no matter when they left. Let's say, people moving in the 80s, that they'll think back and look at Ireland still as their home, and still as a place that they'd like to connect to through their culture, and through organizations like our own and others. Yeah, and I just think, I suppose then that ties into a responsibility on our side to move beyond these like obsolete views of Irish people. Irish is white, Irish is Catholic, Irish is straight. Yeah, so I think those are my hopes. Sorry, I've kind of rambled a little bit there, but yeah.
No, you're all good. You're all good, Brendan. Niamh.
I think I'm a mix of hope, frustration, and fear. I'd echo what Brendan says about these far right ideologies that a couple of years ago I naively, honestly thought would never take hold here. And sweet Christ, like, look at us. It is desperate and shameful, and it is on us to, and I don't mean call it out, I mean block, dismantle, destruct, destroy as much of that thinking, that narrative. It's on us to be more than allies, and it's on us to. I'm still learning about what that allyship and being an accomplice is, and how to do and be better. But it is literally on us to get in the way of that stream of bile, be it online, in person. It is real. It is out there. So I'll get the negative stuff out of the way. But the frustration. I mean, Lorraine, I don't know how you and people from underrepresented communities maintain such grace and eloquence and dignity when I really think about it. I would sometimes want to scream and frisbee plates at a wall, out of the sheer frustration. So again, it is on us, it is on me to take on and to continue to try and be and do better. And I say do better, and I mean that in all the little ways. I think, Paul, you touched upon it, in tiny ways every day, whether that's visibility, whether that's, I'm quite hopeful You know, my kids are in creche and their peers look way more interesting than maybe my peers did when I was modeling around Montessori. You know, my daughter, she's not even one, and her first doll is not white. You know, the storybooks we have in our house, I would hope are a bit better and more interesting and more inclusive than the ones that I grew up with. I have hope because I work in a space, and I mean the arts sector rather than, you know, but also especially arts, that where that curiosity is key, and when it takes hold, it everything is better. We're richer. It's more interesting, and I have started to realize that, you know, we can all make choices, whether that's personally, professionally. You can choose how and where to spend your money. And I'm not saying, you know, you dismantle all of the contracts that your organization has, but if there is a new tender, you know, and you're putting it out, and most tenders should be blind, like castings could or should, but ensure that people who are not in the usual clubs at least know about it, so there's an equality of opportunity. And there's just tiny little ways every day that you think, well, I'm just one person and I don't have a lot of influence. And if you break it down and you stay tuned in and you stay listening and learning, and it's a really, when you cast aside the frustration and the fear, it's a second brilliant space to be in. It's way more enjoyable and richer for that.
Thank you, Niamh. I just think, actually, just thinking about the trolls and all the haters, you know, when you got a hater, you know you're doing something right. So that's just fuel for me, really. Ronnie, I'm handing over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this has been brilliant. This has been brilliant to be with you, and I'm really enjoying the conversation. As much as it's challenging and everything, I'm really enjoying it. And I think, you know, every part of me is an optimist. I feel as if my inclination is to be positive and optimistic, and yet the last 4 years that we've gone through here in the United States has been hell, right? We have endured 4 years of, you know, blatant, clear racism in sort of in our government policies and everything, and it's been so discouraging to sort of see it so visible, you know. And even recently, in the last week or so, we've had prominent people saying that America is not racist, you know, that we're still in denial that this is actually like a racist country, a racist society, and that we are racist, you know. So I think for me, my hope would be, like, I really keep coming back to the abolitionists in the 1800s, like, to abolish racism. You know, I would hope that I would have the grace and courage to own it, and to, as you were saying about disrupting and about interrupting, and sort of like to be, you know, to have the courage to name it, and to really sort of like dismantle racism, right? Whether it's in my life, in, you know, in all aspects of my work, in society, and all of my sort of in my wee world. But that's what I would hope is, and I get so encouraged when I have conversations like this, and conversations with my colleagues at Rian, and particularly, you know, to hear, you know, just to hear sort of like the people really wanting to change and to learn and to unlearn our ways of sort of being. I get really encouraged when I hear conversations like this, you know, and I hope that you do have the global sort of community conversations, Lorraine.
We're doing it.
We're all in, like, we would be all in on that. I think that would be brilliant. So yeah, I'm hopeful, but we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go, certainly in the United States.
But Ronnie, thank you for that. And we're definitely going to do it. It's happening in June. The first one is happening in June. But I truly believe that we can change the world. Like, I truly believe that. When I think about who we are as Irish people, like Ireland is in the United Ireland, there's 6.5 million people. There's treble that in the small place that I am currently in London. The Irish people have gone across the world and they've brought Halloween. Halloween is celebrated everywhere. They've brought St. Patrick's Day on the 17th of March. Everyone globally wants to be Irish. Now, if we can do that in our smallity, we can do anything. We can do anything. We've proven it. We are a diaspora of 80 million across the world. We can change the world. And I'm bringing you all with me. So in June, you're going to be at the table with me, and we're inviting anybody else that wants to be at that table, and we're going to start making change. Yeah. Thank you all so much for giving so generously of yourselves tonight, for putting yourselves in really uncomfortable positions, for bringing your honesty, for bringing all your love, all your dedication, all your warmth, and all your inclusion. Thank you for supporting us on the journey. Thank you for giving up your time to be with us tonight. Thank you. So just over to you to say your last goodbyes.
Bye.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Lorraine, you're awesome.
Thank you for tuning in to Irish Roots. Irish Roots is a completely volunteer-led festival. If you can donate, please do. For more information and to see what else is happening, jump over to our website. It's www.iamirish.org. From all of us at I Am Irish, Gurav Mila Mahagut.